have some questions for me because I know that some of them submitted some questions. So let's start with something cool.
Yeah, absolutely. So, Sue, I was going to start with your question, which I have right up here.
Okay.
And so your question was, I understand the theory of bend, inside leg at girth, outside behind girth, but I do not understand when judges remark needs more bend. What exactly is the judge looking for?
Question. So if you'll be patient with me, I'll break it down just a little bit because we kind of need to do that. How many of you have been and looked at the horse biomechanic YouTube video? Because there's one whole hour of all of us and a number of experts on horse biomechanics, and it's worth looking at. So if you haven't done it, of course, it's on the YouTube channel and it says biomechanics. We're just going to review really quickly the 5 places mechanically on a horse where a judge thinks they see bend, and I'm going to put quotes around it because the creepy part of this whole thing is when you get to that educational biomechanics Zoom call that was recorded. There's all kinds of stuff from Hillary Clayton on there, who's our biomechanical expert in the United States, and there's wonderful diagrams of the skeleton from the top down, and there's a lot of description about how you imagine that a horse bends and how it actually bends. So the 5 places that a judge thinks as they see a horse bend, the 5 places is lateral pole flexion. So that's the horse keeping its face perpendicular, not tilting it, but rotating its head around on the stem of its neck, which it is, horses are capable of that. Now, the column of the neck, although we kind of think about right below the mane is the nuchal ligament. That's a huge elastic. It's as big as your arm, and it goes all the way down the back and all the way to the tail of the horse. And that elastic is one of the things that the horse uses itself to balance itself with and pull its spine all around. It's amazing. It's as big as your arm. That isn't actually the skeleton, because the skeleton is more like the cervical vertebra go kind of up and down. And the creepy part about those is that they actually rotate, they bend over, the neck bends over, and it can pull forward. So it has a lot of mobility, and it can bend, but it also, all of those cervical vertebrae rotate, so they can twist their neck as well as bend their neck. So then the shoulder blades, which are attached over the last C6 and C7, over C6 and C7 at the base of the neck, and then the vertebrae come up, and we think of those as, those are their scapulas, or basically we talk about the withers. The withers are interesting because they're not attached as a joint, they're attached with ligaments and soft tissue. So they're kind of weird. When a horse uses its thoracic, they can actually shrug their shoulders, which their withers, they can shrug those, they can lift them. They can also flex around a little, like front wheel drive. It's not a lot, but it happens. It, in your brain, your eye perceives that its shoulders flexed somehow. If the horse looks like it's bending, you perceive that you saw it go like this as it went around a corner. That's what you think you see. Now, right where the saddle sits is amazing. That can only flex 3 degrees. That's, the rib cage area, the front of the rib cage area, which just barely flexes around. It doesn't really bend, but it does flex around, and all of those ribs and everything at the bottom kind of float. There's a lot of soft tissue between the ribs. The rib cage flexes around a little bit. They're attached at the top to the spine, and there's this kind of flexing 3 degrees. Then the lumbar spine, which is right behind the saddle, that goes up and down, it undulates, it never bends sideways like a snake, it doesn't. And then so then you're stuck with what happens behind, which is the SI known as the jumper's bump, the hocks, stifle, fetlocks, and all of the soft tissue works all together. So all of the joints from the SI, hocks, stifle down take weight, and it's like the universal joint in your truck on your rear end drive. It kind of goes like this all around the corners and slips around and goes up and down and bends, and the hips lower and take weight, and they transfer weight back and forth between the legs, and you kind of see the hips go around corners like this. That's what you think you see. The SI has to be able to rock, and it rocks around a little bit. It definitely has to be able to rock like this to canter. And those joints all together work together like your differential joint in your truck to keep weight stabilized behind, and to keep the horse, if it goes around a circle and it doesn't just go around and go, haunches out, if it actually looks like it tracks around the corner and then goes around and the hind legs follow the front end tracks, that system of joints back there transfers weight back and forth and compresses one leg and brings the other one forward and adducts the legs together under the stomach. Adducting is when one leg comes more diagonally under instead of traveling straight, which is part of engagement to take weight, change balance. This is a really long description for bend, and I'm sorry, but mechanically, we kind of have to learn. So there's 5 places: pole rotation, neck bend, shoulder rotation, body flexion, the rib cage, and the hip. I usually say rotation, but flexion. Those are the 5 places. Within every, so next comes the part, well, at what level and what exercise were you doing when the judge said to you, needs more bend? So let's take something simple, like maybe a 20-meter circle. And on a 20-meter circle, the horse goes around in this nice arc, and you imagine this nice circle that we draw. And let's say we had a drone and we look down on the horse, and from the top, we perceive that that horse is going right around. And amazingly enough, we think that that horse bends evenly throughout its spine, kind of like the spine just adapts itself to that curve. But now that we've thought about it, we go, well, that isn't even possible, because the 20-meter circle curve is bigger than the 30 degrees that's possible in the rib cage, and the arcing of that. Also, we know that the lumbar doesn't bend at all. So there's a few vertebrae there, they're absolutely straight. So when you take an x-ray down of the horse and he's accommodating himself to this line of travel with this arc, however archy that arc is, whatever the degree of the arc is that it's on, uh, you're like, your brain tells you that it's that the horse appears to have a normal curve. But if you x-ray its spine, you see that it's making all these accommodations, and actually the lumbar didn't bend at all, and the rib cage only flexes around some, and he accommodates himself. And all of this accommodating occurs by all of these areas like the shoulders that aren't really mechanical joints. There's a lot of soft tissue, and the SI and the hind legs that pull this all together and transfer weight back and forth. So then you're thinking, well, okay, we also have to talk about, and I'm going to keep coming back to things. This is a big subject. So it's a good thing we have time and not too many people. So good for you for a good question. I hope you're not getting bored yet. And not at all. Oh, good. I can lip read. Hopefully. So the next part is, if you get lucky and it was something simple, they told you through the short side or 20-meter circle, or, you're maybe in something, a simple movement, like maybe we're in basic and you come out to off the diagonal out to X and then back to the rail, something simple like that. But in the exercises level 2 through 5, shoulder in, half pass, haunches in. If you are doing a specific exercise where there is a technical description of that exercise, and there are, those are all in the rule book. Every single exercise you are asked to do has a technical description in the WDAA rulebook, USEF rulebook, and it'll say, I don't remember what the number is, so I'll just quote a wrong number, but let's say WD 117 might be turn on, let's see, turn on the hunches, or it might be shoulder in, or, and it says it will be blah, 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 blah. And it says, 30 to 32 degrees. It will have bend, how the horse will be tracking. They will be adducting with their inside hind leg. This produces collection. I mean, there's a description. Those descriptions tell the advanced riders, where the emphasis of the bend is, because for every exercise, the emphasis of where we're sort of expecting the horse to bend, it does change a little bit. Shoulder in bend is primarily lateral pole flexion. There shouldn't be, I mean, if there's neck bend, it's almost not, not recognizable. I mean, if I truly measured it next rate, the horse is probably the tiniest bit of flexion, but really there's not really neck bend in shoulder in. Lateral pole flexion, that you get some flexion in those shoulders. Then, the rib cage is going to flex around the inside leg, and you only have a 30 to 32 degree movement off the track. So that doesn't require a lot of bend. Shoulder in does not have an awful lot of bend. It's really about riding the horse off the outside aids, lateral pole flexion, and some shoulder flexion. Meanwhile, you drive the hind leg forward and you're teaching the horse to keep it engaged while it's driving into the outside rein. Now, let's say, people think that haunches in is the exact reverse of shoulder in, and it is not actually the same exercise. Good for you, you know this. It's a lot wider angle. It's a lot closer to 40 degrees. We're looking for a whole lot more bend in order to get a really good one. There's a ton of lateral pole flexion. The necks usually do bend, as much shoulder flexion as you can get, and as much rib cage flexion as you can get, wide angle, and the horse really tracking along on the rider's outside aids. So we're doing haunches in maybe down the rail, but the rider really sitting on the inside seat bone to keep that horse forward and around the inside. People are like, oh, that's the reverse of shoulder in. And you're like, no, it isn't. It's so much wider. It's a lot more complicated. It shows a lot more bend, and it's the preparatory exercise for the half pass. So the same thing like side pass. The description of side pass in our rule book says that slight lateral pole flexion in the direction that you begin is expected. And the reason that is because if you actually do that, if the horse actually just barely looks in the direction they're going, that they will start correctly maintaining parallel, and that they will begin with a pair of legs. If you allow them to counterbend, or even if they're just straight, they usually start with their haunches and they lose parallelism, and the legs are no longer sort of in pairs crossing and not balanced. So every single exercise has a description of some bend, and hopefully it's specific enough. Now, when it isn't specific, that's when the riding instructor and the trainer comes into it, and those coaches that really know how to get these movements are explaining to us like, hey, this is the one where, it's more about the pole. It's about being on your outside leg. It's about being on the outside rein. It's not about neck bend. Don't pull the neck in and the shoulder in. So I may be talking about exercises that are further along than you're doing because I don't know all of you. So I apologize if I am, but I'm trying to show you where this is going, because I'm going to back up to the simple exercises real quick here. So when they said to you that you didn't have enough bend, number one, bend starts with a pole. And at intro, basic, a ton of my friends, there's somebody, Linda, is that Linda smiling at me? Great, hi Linda. I had to look for your little name there. You don't need a lot of bend, but every place that the horse goes begins with lateral pole flexion. And if it doesn't have lateral pole flexion in a turn, a corner, a serpentine, a canter depart, whatever, they'll say it didn't have any bend. And a lot of times at those low levels, that's almost all the bend you really need to have, because some of those exercises at basic, those 20-meter circles, those have such, the arc of the 20-meter circle is so large that the horse really doesn't need a lot of bend to follow that arc. It's a very small um, arc radius. So what happens though is that because the horses are traveling pretty straight, the judges see that the hunches fell out more than they see that you didn't have the pole, or that they see that the horse was counterbent, which most of us do pretty good going left because our horses are naturally hollow to the left and convex to the right. And we sit more on our right seat bones, which means that we tend to sit heavier on our right side and our right leg is stronger. So going left, it's really easy for us to have the horses naturally weak on that side anyway. So we're trying to, turn, and we've got our strong side on the outside. So we're going left, our bends looks pretty good. We start to go right, and almost all, like 90% of the horses in the world are hollow to the left naturally, right from birth. And then we lead them too much for the left, and so they're hollow to left. So you're trying to go right, but they're slightly counterbent because naturally this is their own normal crookedness. So worse than that, you not only have to straighten them, so we have to unbend them from left, make them not hollow to left as you're tracking right. Then you get straight. I know Dana was working on this way early in the year. Like, we couldn't get bend to the right. We just weren't counterbent left while I was coaching her because the horse can only learn so fast. So we got him straight, and now he's beginning to come around to the right and be more correct. And when you know your weak left leg is on the outside, it's hard for us to keep our left seat bone down as we track to the right. The more you sit, when you're tracking right, the more you sit on your right side, the more the horse counterbends but falls in. So what he does is he puts his pole out but leans on its right shoulder for balance. So the more I make the mistake of sitting in or leaning in by mistake, I lose that bend. So this was Sue, right? So is it frequent, this comment, like you need more bend, and is it these turns? And is it the circles, Sue? And what level kind of are we talking about?
Well, I will be honest, I am doing third level right now.
Okay.
So this is, we've always had a
Half-assed.
issue.
Half-assed.
So I've been trying to understand what it is that we're looking for to try and get an idea of how to feel when it is not enough.
Okay.
I mean,
Well,
I understand shoulder
yeah.
in is 3-track, haunches in is 4-track, like you said, with more bend.
Okay, let's go through those really quick though. I mean, there's a checklist for this, like literally. So when judges say that there isn't enough bend and shoulder in, there can only be two things. One is that you didn't have any lateral pole flexion at all to the inside.
Okay.
Number two was that if you don't have enough angle coupled with the lateral pole flexion, and you have to be sitting on your outside seat bone, and on the outside leg has to be actively guarding, because what happens in shoulder in is people start down the wall and they're so worried about their inside leg that they use a lot of inside leg. It's too far back. They're very nervous and they're using their leg a lot and in a very hard way, and eventually the horse just stiffens its rib cage and just runs up the rails, sort of like, okay, well, you're telling me to kind of leg yield because you're pushing me up the rail in this kind of diagonal position. and you're worried about me stopping, and so your leg is going, and they tightens their rib cage. So you need guarding outside leg. So one of the things to learn is there is a clear sequence of aiding for shoulder in. So you're going to learn the clear sequence of aiding, and it starts, way back in the corner, but without lateral pole flexion and soft guarding outside aids with weight on the outside. And this is, there are a few trainers in the United States that actually teach shoulder in biomechanically incorrectly. I'm not sure how they fell into the trap of learning it incorrectly, but it does freak me out how many places I go, because shoulder in is one of the few exercises where the horse is bent left and he's moving right. He's bent away from the direction he's going, and a rider must always sit in the direction the horse is moving, which means that when you come around the corner you'd come around the corner of the short side for left shoulder in, you position yourself on your right seat bone and you have your right leg guarding. Yeah. And there are some trainers by mistake, I don't know where they learned this, but they sit in and they lean in. And it's like, wow, biomechanically. And then you say they always, and they know the precept of you should always sit in the direction you're going. What they don't know is that they're not going left shoulder in. They're going right. That's the part they don't know. So there's a little mistake there. So shoulder in is you need the pole, guarding, and rib cage. That's it for shoulder in. It's not a lot. And be sure you're on the 30 degrees, 30 to 32. That's enough. Haunches in, the pole. Get the pole in the neck around. Because if you're going away from me and I can't see, if you have your pole around to the right, then it's leg yield. And you have to start shoulder in and haunches in with the pole. Half pass is a variation of haunches in, written on a diagonal. Same thing. It takes a lot of bend everywhere. And it's those two exercises take pole flexion a lot, and neck bend, which we don't use a lot of neck bend in anything else. And then it's the one time that you really have to know how to use your seat, haunches in and half pass, to sit in the direction you're going, because it's your thighs, your knees. On a man, he says it's his seat, but women don't feel it under our fanny. We feel it in our thighs. I say to people, turn your ski boots to turn the shoulders of your horse. Excuse me. Then I got excited. Okay. So it's about the exercise, figuring out which exercise you're on and where the bend is going to be and how you're going to get it. So you haven't had enough bend. Focus on the pole first and then move down through the horse. Okay, who's next? Did we cover it?
That's awesome. Thank you.
Perfect. So I have Linda's question here. And so Linda's question is, when you're headed into a diagonal, what exactly happens at the beginning? For instance, when is the horse's nose leaving the track, and then feet, and where is the letter? I think my thoughts are the nose is turning as it reaches the letter, and as we bend into the diagonal, my leg passes the letter and then bring the hip around and we're on the diagonal. And then to finish, nose at the track starts to move onto the track, legs follow, and my leg is now passing the letter and we straighten out. Has she got this right or wrong, Ida?
It's a good description. And you've thought about it. I'm impressed with how detailed you thought about it, Linda. Good job. And I think, if we wrote it down in a book, I think it's a good description. And I think it sort of takes care of it. However, with that being said, if you've got the patience, I'd add a few things to help you out here. So when we do this, I get to wear a lot of hats, and I don't have to be just a judge. And I'm not just educating judges because you all know that I coach, and I coach a lot of people at a lot of levels. And one of the things that I talk to them about, which I don't know, maybe it's an unfair advantage, and maybe my colleagues would rather I didn't tell you what it is we can see and what we can't see. I got this display behind me, and I told Dana I wanted her to also have a ring behind her because I might need to point at this ring so y'all can see me, right? You see the letters behind me. You know, we judge usually from a little platform, so we sit up a little bit higher, but it's not a lot. There are depth perception problems for judges. Now, granted, occasionally there's a judge on the side. Like I just got done at Arab Sport Horse Nationals, and there was a judge at E judging Western Dressage. So we're at C and E, two judges. Some of the competitors that obviously never had a side judge because they weren't good. They were making the 20-meter circles at E really oval. They were huge. The judge marked them way down. You know, there was stuff that they could see at the far end of the ring. Now, this is where this diagonal thing comes into being. If you look along the edge of the riding ring, you see that somebody says, I love it when I twitch tell secrets. I do, I tell secrets. I don't know if my colleagues hate me. They never say anything. Or you know what? I don't think they watch, so they don't know. But when you ride along the rail and you look down, there's your outside horse's foot and the inside horse's foot, you know, and you're like, okay, well, the rail, it has a width. That's what I'm trying to get at, Linda, is that diagonal change has a width. It's the width of your horse. So here's the part that's really creepy. I saw your question earlier today, and I was like, I know what I do, and I know what I coach people, and I've done this a million times, and I've been teaching since I was 13, so that's more than 50 years now. So sorry, I just told you how old I am. But I went out in the ring anyway, and I looked at this again because I go, I'm going to tell her this, but I want to make sure what I'm saying. There's a reason that the letters are that far from the end of the ring, and the first letter is standard because when you turn that corner at the trot or the jog, when I turn that corner, I turn the corner, I turn the corner, and I never get straight. I come right around and I come right into that diagonal. Do you do that, Linda? Okay, but you have your letters set the way to the right width, the right length from the end of the ring, right?
I do, but I'm a low enough level that I've been trying to get straight out of the corner and then and I'm thinking of like C to H, right? So I'm coming around that corner and then like at H, I'm trying to, and then we've got this 9-foot long draft horse, right? And now suddenly I'm trying to get him to bend onto HXF.
Yeah, and you're past, you have all you can do to get off the rail at H, or you're a little
Correct.
past. Okay.
Correct.
So especially if you have a big horse, you come around the corner, you come around the corner. I just keep coming around. So this is what I'm trying to talk to you about. And I'm hoping I'm going to be able to explain it because usually I kind of draw it on a grease board or something. But when you leave, let's say we're going HXF, which is going behind me on this ring. When you leave X over here, the other way, that way, not that way. It's backwards for me, ladies. Sorry, I don't know what way I'm going. My horse's nose is off the rail at before like I get to the letter. Like it's off. I turned, and I turned right onto the diagonal. It's like I turned more than a 90 and I kept turning and then I straightened the horse as I came out of that turn. And by the time I get to the letter, I'm on that diagonal and my horse's right shoulder is well off that rail, which, you know, okay, so the rail we decided was maybe what, 12 inches or 7 inches, or when you ride down the track of your ring and you look at the two sets of footprints that you have that you've beaten along the rail, do you think it's 7 or 8 inches or 10? I mean, there's a width there. So when
I think he's 10 or 11. Like, I mean, he's
Okay, it's
wide,
big.
right?
Great,
Yeah.
it's big, yeah, okay, so we're not gonna have trouble if I say 12 inches, let's say that.
Okay.
So we turn that corner. So now what he's on that diagonal and now you're headed up there to F. So the reason that I took this picture of this ring is that when you go up there, you see I have wooden rails on that ring, and you can see there's some buckets, yellow buckets on the ground. Those are the letters. You're headed for 12 or 15 inches before the letter. And I'm going to put so I turned the corner at H and my right shoulder was off the rail. His head was off the rail at H. His nose was off the rail at H because I already made the turn. And as I go across that diagonal, the right-hand side of my horse, the right-hand side is going to be on the judge's downhill side of F, the 12 or 15 inches at least, and maybe more. Because what happens is I have a depth perception problem when you go away from me. If you get this line right, when you get there, you look straight. You should never bend before you hit the rail. You hit the rail, you bounce off it, and you bend through the corner. You don't bend. Don't bend when you step onto the rail. So you want to hit the rail before that letter, and the horse's neck goes onto the long side, and you straighten out up there, and then he's straight and you bend through the corner. And that means that you got to the rail before that letter. If I stood up there, I could see that maybe your head hit the rail 15, 20 inches, 21 inches before you got there. But from here, your horse's rear end and you cover that letter. Now, if you go up that line and I can see the letter on your left, you're too far to the right of the line. And my perception is that even if you think that you stepped onto the line, I'm going to tell you that you were late getting back to the rail and that you didn't go in the corner because I can't see you go in the corner and you don't have enough time to bend into the corner, even if you're in intro. And it's a 200-foot ring. You still can't do it. You can't. You should see how far, like if you're at level 5 or an FEI rider, and you need another step, you need one more step because you have 3 steps before you took a diagonal, maybe one time changes in Grand Prix, and you got to turn right onto the center line and start a zigzag immediately. You need one more step. You need 2 more steps because I couldn't get collected. My horse looked at something.
So evidently there's something here.
And you keep step to
Hopefully
the
I'm
left
muted.
as much as you can, and you cover that letter so the judge can't see it, and you're there. Is this too confusing? Does it make you too? Yeah. So I
No,
thought
I'm autistic. The more detailed, the better. Like 100%. If more people talk to me this way, I'd ride better.
Okay, well, in the same theory, then you may have heard us talk on our calls about the only time that you want to completely bisect the center line is when an exercise says turn onto the center line. Your horse has to be centered by God on its sternum on that center of that center line. But if you're doing a 10-meter circle, the outside of your toe skims over that line. You don't touch it. It's like tennis. Stay inside the line on a 10-meter circle to get a big score. If any part of your horse goes over the center line in a 10-meter circle, the judge says, you were over. And it might be this much. It might be half of your horse went over. And the minute I got this across to Dana, she was like, wow, that makes life easier. And your scores jump up. So it's weird about that a line has width. And I don't know what to tell you. I don't hear anybody training this. I don't hear people teaching this anywhere. But amazingly enough, the European trainers that I had in Europe that were preparing us for FEI tests, they didn't talk about the width of the line, and they were very careful about what they said because somebody might quote them, you know. But if I would ride the way I'm describing to you, they'd be like, I like that. That's an 8. That's an 8. That's an 8. And I always rode underpower horses in dressage. I did not have fancy, expensive horses. I was able to be successful at high levels and in Wellington, not because I had expensive horses. It was because they were trained within an inch of their life. And these judges and trainers that worked with me had taught me how to exhibit the horse. And because I was a judge, I knew exactly where I had to go for me to think that it was accurate. Is it really accurate? Well, if they were right down there, they'd see that you got to the rail a little bit early. But if it improves the corner, it improves your collection, and they like it, they're barn blind to it, because we're looking for, did you ride me a great transition? Did the line look good? Were you straight? Did you bend through the corner? And were you able to make the next exercise? And if you were, that's all, at least good. So it gets kind of odd. I loved your description and I thought you have a clue, but I'm also talking to you now to start thinking about the depths of the widths of the lines for perception. And so the closer you are to the judge, the more you have to be real clear about they can see. As you move down there, you have a little bit more leeway, and especially getting in those corners. Two things about being at the weird end of the ring. The far end is tough. That diagonal, stay on the lower end of it as you get into it. 20-meter circles always look like people are using the corners. I've gone down there myself with my own video machine and I'm videotaping myself and I'm friggin' cutting the corners. I'm way off the corners trying to make a 20-meter circle really look round. And on the camera, it just doesn't look like you're far enough off the track between, like, you know, A and E, which is near V, and then between B and F, which is near P, you know, that 20-meter circle thing there. So I did it over and over and over, videotaping it, and you can see how far the two corners have to be off the corner for a judge not to say, gee, you used the corner a little bit in the 20-meter circle. It's pretty far off. Once you get onto it, though, and you learn it, it's just a learned skill, and you're like, wow, I got this. And you'll like it. So was that too complicated?
No, it helped immensely. So now I'm thinking, like, coming back towards the judge with KXM, then I'm going to want to be careful to not hit M so early like I did F, because it's going to be visible from C, correct?
But I will still tell you that when I come KXM, that I put the left side of the horse on the track, not the right side.
Ah, okay.
I
see what
still
you're
do.
saying.
Yes, because if you really want to ride your corners, you know, and you don't want to, you have to get on, you have to come up to that track with the horse absolutely straight and get on it and then ride a corner. What I see is people turn off the diagonal by bending.
I'm totally doing that. That's why I'm like, I think I'm losing loads of points because I'm just fading off the diagonal into this half bend thing. Like, it's not crisp.
Right at it at a blunt point, skim off it, and then make a corner. And that's why it's important to not be late.
Got it.
And don't forget, you know, when you come up to that corner, 90% of that corner is 90% of that turn right there is you need to look around the corner yourself. You need lateral pole flexion. And then it's all about your outside leg. Like, I can't tell you how many times my European riding instructors are like, stop using your inside leg in circles. You don't need your outside legs. Turns are always about the outside leg to prevent the haunches from falling out, to encourage. The inside leg is a fulcrum for the rib cage to bend around. If you push with your inside leg against the rib cage, you'll see the horse actually push out into you and stiffen. And so you have his rib cage and you push on it and he flattens it. So you have to bend him around it. And that, the outside leg bends him around the fulcrum of your inside leg. If you start attacking him with your inside leg to create rib cage bend on the inside, horses push back on their rib cages when you do that to them, and they stiffen them and flatten them, and you actually lose the bend.
You can feel it. Like
Yes,
I
you
can,
can.
thinking
Yes,
about the ride, I'm like, ah, I can feel him pushing back against my left calf. Like,
yes.
oh,
So I have so many people come into clinics and say, I have to get him off my inside leg. He's on my inside leg. He's driving me crazy. And I'm like, I take your inside leg off. Just, I don't care. I mean, we make a little joke like, cut it off. I don't care. Don't use it, because it isn't him. That is not him. He's not leaning on you. He's not leaning on your inside leg. You don't have it in the right position. It's not far enough forward, and it should be neutral. And when a horse leans on the inside leg, you don't have any outside rein, and you probably aren't using enough outside aids, the outside guarding aid. So let's talk about straightening the horse maybe a little bit, getting it onto the outside aids and the outside rein, getting a little forward so that we can get onto that outside rein and into it so the half halt works. And he won't be on that. And you can't, the more you kick the inside leg to get a horse off it, the more it's on it.
and I can't win with him, right? He's so big. It's like,
Yeah, you don't want
you're
to
not
go
going
there.
to win this battle.
Right, right, right. Okay, I
Thank
think
you.
we
That helps. I think, like, I'm going to use that in practice this week.
good. We'll be hoping to hear good things. Keep us
Absolutely.
informed. We like to hear if it's successful.
Yes, we do. That was great, Ida. Thank you so much. You're just a wealth of knowledge for all of this. It's always amazing.